Die Papiere bitte!
Augenblick, warten Sie. Aus Frankfurt. Sind Sie Frankfurter?
Ja, ein Hotdog.
So ein komischer Kauz. Die spinnen die armen Hotdog.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am your host the Caffeine Gamer, and I would like to apologize a bit in advance for still having a bit of a cold these past few days, so I might sound a bit weird. But anyway, this is a slice of Wolfenstein the Old Blood, and I'm going for more of a first impressions sort of video for this. So let's get to it. Wolfenstein the Old Blood is a standalone sort of expansion, but not really. It's a standalone built on top of the foundation that you found in the New Order. So you have a few of the same weapons with slightly different skins, a lot of the same mechanics, but you also have a lot of new mechanics, a lot of new puzzle type mechanics for some enemies, and you also have a lot of new weapons, of course, because that's one of the, one of the foundations for Wolfenstein, basically. So what is old and what is new in the sequel to the New Order, that is, the Old Blood? Well, some of the old mechanics, as I mentioned, returns. It still feels and plays pretty much the same, and the usual handguns and assault rifles and everything feel pretty much the same. And movement is, it's really solid, and there's not a lot of clipping issues or stuff like that with the collisions, so that's always a huge plus for me in FPSs, because I hate clipping into stuff and clipping through the floor most of all in FPS games. That's kind of a bummer. But it works really well. It's really solid. It's a very solid foundation because it worked really well in the New Order too. And the things that are new in the Old Blood, that's really confusing to say. I was about to say the New Order there. But the things that are new are, as I mentioned, there are new weapons, like the rocket handgun, that I don't exactly remember the name of right now. There's the double-barreled shotgun, and there's the sawed-off double-barreled shotgun, which we saw in one of the teaser trailers released just a few months ago. Releasing a standalone sort of sequel, a downloadable sequel, I think is a very good format to go with, because since they have a lot of experience now with the engine and they have this foundation with which they can build a sequel upon, they decide to make something that is a bit more condensed but still has the same action-packed sequences. It still has a lot of these sneaking segments that are really tense in the mood. It still has the really detailed and really cool looking environments. And I really have to commend MachineGames for really getting that sense of scale in both of the Wolfenstein games that they've done. Sometimes you feel a little cramped in some modern FPSs. It feels like the space is really limited, and oftentimes it probably is the case because they limit the amount of space to how well the game performs, so feel that too much space is cramping down on the performance. They sort of condense everything, and I feel they haven't sacrificed this in the Wolfenstein games. Instead, they have gone, full scale with everything. Everything feels really grand and, impending, like these, Nazi castles should feel like. And among some of the things that have bothered me a little bit so far in the couple of hours that I've played is that it feels a little bit more on rails so far than the New Order. There are still branching paths, like different paths to take in the levels and secret areas like in traditional FPSs. But it's some of the segments really feel kind of cramped, and the environments still feel grandiose, and the segments themselves, like the action segments, feel like really on rails and sort of not giving you a lot of freedom. It might just be that this is the beginning of the game, they're sort of getting you into the feel of the game. There were a few segments that were open environments and a lot of different paths to take and hide behind and get into cover and shoot away at all the Nazis. And another thing that I have to commend MachineGames for doing too is that since this is technically a prequel to the New Order, this is before the war was won by Germany, as in this alternate timeline. They paid a lot of attention to details like the technology seems not that far ahead as it is in the New Order. For instance, some of the Supersoldaten are connected by wires, like large electrical wires, and powered by these sort of arc reactor type things. You have to either sneak past these huge, gross-ass mechanical super Nazis, or you could sneak up when they're not looking and deactivate the reactor temporarily. It begins charging up again, and you have that window in which you can run up behind them and disconnect their wires so that, you know, you get rid of that threat. It has a lot of positives going for it so far, and the negatives that I mentioned are not really weighing down so much that it bothers me at all. In fact, the main feeling is that brings this whole game up so far and makes me really love it so far is that it feels like a proper sequel to the New Order. It feels like a proper sequel to Return to Castle Wolfenstein. It feels like it's a very polished up version of the environments of Return to Castle Wolfenstein sometimes. And it's a slightly different type of gameplay or slightly different feel to it, but it still feels like Wolfenstein. And I think that's in the essence of all these games, that both the New Order and the Old Blood still have, you know, that almost sarcastic type sense of humor to them, and they sneak in a bit of references to other game franchises and stuff like that every now and then. They still do it really well. It's a lot of attention to detail. It still feels serious underneath that surface, that, you know, hard-ass action hero surface. Instead, it is very well crafted. It feels like a really solid shooter, and it has a good groundwork with the story, with the universe that they've built up since the New Order, with all these really grand buildings, really impressive technology and everything. Of course, that borrows a lot from the past games, Wolfenstein from 2009, is it? And Return to Castle Wolfenstein, of course. But it still stands on its own, because it's not just borrowing the elements straight from those old games, it also does its own thing with it, and you can really tell that the designers on MachineGames, they really love doing this. My final verdict so far, a couple of hours into the game, I really like it. It shows a lot of promise, and I really love The New Order. It was one of my favorite games, if not my absolute favorite game last year. So this is a very welcome addition to my Steam library, definitely. I wish I could have a hard copy of this to put in the shelf. It's just that kind of game. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.
Should open the way into the keep.